Okay, my name is David Foster, and it is my esteemed pleasure to have Miss Roberson. May I call you Miss Roberson? Is that
Sure.
too
Kim is
formal?
fine. No,
Kim
Kim is
is fine.
fine. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for allowing this opportunity between you and I to talk about technology in Prince George's County Public Schools. This is for an assignment, so I want to make sure that I am thanking my professor, Dr. Cook, for the opportunity to do this assignment. And I also want to make sure that I give my flowers to a real hero, in my opinion,
Mhm.
Miss Kim Roberson. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, David.
Okay, I'm going to share my presentation, and I want to make sure it's there. We go. Is that the right one? It's the wrong one. So presenting. Go to the right one. There we go. That's the presentation.
Gotcha.
Okay. I just want to review the UMGC interview guidelines real quick, just to set norms for the meeting. First, I need to introduce myself. My name is David Foster. I teach at Patuxent Elementary School. I am a tenured teacher with Prince George's County Public Schools. I've been teaching for 13 years, and I am currently up for my master's in informational technology with a focus in education. I am seeking consent to record. Do I have it?
You do?
Thank you very much. I promise to use active listening. I promise to ask follow-up questions. I also promise to present a respectful and professional demeanor at all times. And I want to thank the guest of honor again, Miss Kimberly Roberson. I don't think enough people are giving you your flowers, because
No, thank you.
after I saw the interview you did with Hoot and the craziness that was
The
the
pandemic
pandemic.
was fun. It was fun.
Oh my goodness. I was like, I have to interview this lady. Like, bump the rest. I know I've got like a couple of
It was
days
fun. It
before
was
I have to
fun.
do this, but I gotta meet. I had to meet. Okay. So I'm gonna treat this like a talk show. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna have banter. It's gonna be enjoyable. And I'm looking forward to it already. So the focus for this wonderful experience that we're about to have is fourfold: curriculum and instruction, professional learning, budget and resources, reimagining use of time.
Okay.
Curriculum instruction. So I'm going to be feeding off of what I learned from the interview
Hmm.
to fuel my questions and hopefully your responses. You asked a very important question during the interview. You said with Miss Barbara Huth, how do we share work with students? Because let me tell you, the first time I sat down and said, how am I going to share a reading story in a textbook with all these kids, like what, 17 miles away out in Riverdale? I was literally typing the stories by hand
Mm.
from the book
Mm.
into a Google Doc and then sending it via Google Classroom. My question is, with all these cross curricular standards that we have, trying to jam pack them into 7.5 hours a day, how, in your professional opinion,
Mm.
do we grow the math or reading proficiency to the district average or even beyond the district average at this point? Because right
It's-
now, reading is not great,
yeah,
math is
math is
not
not
great. Let's
great.
keep it a buck.
That's interesting. So I'll first say my background is not in curriculum and instruction, right? So I just
Mhm.
a little bit of history about me. I am a former classroom teacher. I started teaching. I've been in public education for like 30 years at this point. Um, I came from an elementary education background, but currently, and for
She's
the
family.
last 20 or so years, I have been strictly in the instructional technology space. So I first say that because I am not in any way in charge of curriculum instruction in Prince George's County. But I'll say some of the things that I've seen that have worked, right? Which
Please.
are some strategies that people use a lot around project-based learning, right? How do we how do we create real life projects and exemplar work that combine both math and reading standards and proficiencies together so that students have an opportunity not to learn them in isolation, but they can learn them in a way that makes sense, that they can, make them applicable to real world. I know that a lot of times, even personally, we learn through stories. We learn things stick to our brains when there's a story or something that we can attach that's real world to it. So, I think I think we've seen a trajectory over time in education, at how things grow and develop both in math and in reading. Um, Common Core standards are very different now as it relates to how math is taught. Um, and I think about reading and writing and how that has changed over time and how things have been taught. But I think I guess one just very simple strategy is the application of it in a real world context through project based learning. So that I think that's the easiest way that I would probably answer that question about growing math and reading proficiency. And I don't necessarily know that I see that a lot. I think we see I think we see an alignment across grade bands, right? So like you may have learned this in pre-K and then you learn a little bit more in K through 2 and then a little bit more in math, like along that linear trajectory. But I don't know how much we actually layer the two together. And that was when I was a classroom teacher, that was fun for me because I'd have a whole thematic unit behind whatever the thing is that we would do, right? Um, we bring in social studies, we bring in science, like whatever was applicable. So I think that's probably where I would start and try to focus. And I don't know if that's what we're doing there or not. I'll say that because um, I'm not in the curriculum instruction space as tied as I was before. So,
First of all, thank you for mentioning that. Thank you for speaking on your experience as an elementary school teacher. Thank you for giving that caveat about project based learning. I'm teaching first grade right now, and that means I'm teaching all 7 subjects, and it's a headache. And I
hmm
don't understand why we don't have these kids doing project-based learning when it just keeps coming up over again and again and again in conversation in 21st century based skills and stuff like that. Think of all the people who are in the real world doing 1,000 things at once.
exactly. We don't spend 30 minutes on math or 30 minutes on writing and then 30 minutes on like that is not how we are expecting. And I get like some students do need that specific, very direct, very discrete time to learn. Yes. But I feel like a majority of our students could be immersed in a project or a program even. And I don't mean program in a technology sense, but like immerse them in multiple things at once because that's what they're used to anyway. Which is why a lot of them, you know, um, I'll call it distracted, but by distracted by video games. There's a ton of things all happening on the screen at the same time that
Mhm.
they can move forward and figure out which path to take, which way do I turn, like their brains can function in that way. And I think we in education lean away from that when we could lean into it a little bit more than we do.
I totally
My
agree. I
personal
can't.
opinion.
What was your favorite video game? Just a little sidewinder. What was your favorite
What's
video
funny, let
game
me think
growing
about
up?
it. I was, like, really into Frogger and Pac-Man and, like, um,
Classic.
classic games. I'm old. And then race car games, things like that were fun for me. Some fighting games, I didn't mind that, I
Okay,
didn't
now you're
mind
talking
that
my
too.
language. You talking my language
So,
now. Okay.
yeah. So,
I mean, just think about how many times we died in the game
mhm.
over and over and over again. There was no saving, there was no memory card, and we had no problem picking up the stick like two
And
seconds
trying it
later.
again.
and trying it again. I
But
don't
think about
understand.
everything that has happened when you do that, right? Like you process, okay, this is where I went wrong. Let
Mhm,
me figure out a new strategy to try it
mhm.
differently. That doesn't work. Let me do something else. Let me look in a different spot that I didn't look at before. Like it takes all of those things.
And we
Um,
were excited to do it.
we were. Yep.
We were tearing AA batteries out of grandma's remote.
Yeah. I'm a little bit older, so my batteries are bigger, but yes, I had those big D batteries.
D
But
batteries, the
yes.
boombox babies.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Next question. Okay, so this was interesting to me. From April 1st to June 15th, that period
Mm.
of time where you were training all these different teachers to do all these different things on a time crunch. Because it wasn't like, oh, the pandemic's going to be over by summer break, right? We have to get this done. They have to have this under their belt so that by summer they've digested it. Because next year, guess what?
You
We're
expected to
still
see
here.
some. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I can't speak to specifically really great reading and benchmark advanced curriculum because again, at the time during the pandemic, when we and since you referenced the common sense education interview that we did back in 2020, our focus was really how do we get teachers online to do what curriculum and instruction has said these are our, very specific standards out of all of the ones, these are the ones that we have. So I did not focus on that. I focused on them saying, okay, here's the standard that they need to address. Here's the package that we need to, and then we looked at the package and figured out like how best to get them online. So I can't speak specifically to the acquisition of really great reading and benchmark advanced curriculum
Can I paint
specifically.
you a picture?
Sure.
Okay, so benchmark, advance, and really great reading are an online presentation tool that teachers use and put in front of the kids. For the most part, it's narrated television
Yeah. Um,
with a workbook.
Yeah, so and I'm always challenged. I'm always challenged by prescriptive things in that way because I feel like sometimes I understand the diagnostic nature of it because they're needed to determine like where a student is and where they need to progress. So I appreciate that. But I am always of the vein of like, how do I let students be their best self and show their full creativity through technology? And I,
Mhm,
I recognize that just watching, a video or prescribed television, as you call it, isn't always the best way. But given that, right? What are some ways that we can still have students collaborate and have discourse as a result of what they see? Um, how do we get students to, I mean, I know that there's diagnostic tools within both of those that help, the teacher and whoever's looking at the data determine like where the student has fallen within that. But beyond that, like how do you connect students together to help them like learn from one another because that's what they do too, especially as the students are older and they're playing more collaborative games since that's been our theme that we're talking about.
mhm,
um
mhm.
so the question is around how can our administration better support our teachers acquisition of these two tools, specifically the best way to integrate it into one school year. um so again, not being familiar with both of them, I wonder if both are actually necessary. Do both of them give different types of data points for students? Let's just assume that they do, and that both of them are necessary. What are some ways that we have? And I'm assuming you mean during the pandemic. Is that where you're asking me, or in general,
In
from April
general.
1st to June? Okay. So in general, what are some ways that might best support a teacher's acquisition of the two? Um, so I would say it's really important for teachers to understand the end result. Like, what exactly is the data that we're expecting to get back from students? Because to me, looking at the end allows a teacher to peel back the layers and determine how best to start, right? And again, I'm kind of shooting blindly because I'm not as familiar with those two tools. But
Mhm.
looking at the data at the end, can you give me some background about what the data input, the data output are for students at the ends of both of these?
Sure. So RGR, really great reading, provides phonemic awareness. The students
Gotcha.
practice blending sounds, letters, letter recognition. By the end of the program, they're expected to be able to say basic sight words at the first grade level. They're expected to be able to decode, I want to say maybe at the second grade level, or at least be prepared to decode at the second grade level, because they've been exposed to and practiced blends of different letter sounds and different letter combinations.
Got it. So let's unpack that one first. Let's unpack really great reading. So, what strategies do teachers need to employ outside of the use of this prescriptive curriculum in order to help in order to help students actually better understand phonemic awareness? Are there, I'm going back to my problem or project based learning activities. Are there particular strategies that teachers could, if I'm again old, I'm thinking about teaching phonemic awareness a long time ago. So I think about like helping students understand what's in their environment that, you know, can help them understand phonemic awareness and what sounds go together. What things that don't match a particular phoneme um, are some strategies that I would guess would be important for a teacher. Um, what are some ways to ensure that there is some type of discourse in this first grade classroom between
Discourse.
the students to make sure that the students understand one another? Um, I guess at the top of my head, those are some things that I can think of, but also just kind of looking at the data to see like if there are particular students that don't have an understanding of particular sounds,
Mhm,
how
mhm.
what are some strategies? How can we group those students together to help them with those particular sounds or those um, particular activities that they're not addressing? Um, I don't know. At a very basic level, I guess that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Okay.
Tell me more about Benchmark Advance.
It's really a sister program to really great reading, and Benchmark Advance has more of the diagnostic side of it.
Gotcha. So that's where your data is coming from. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I don't know how well I answered that question, but
You
at
did
the
a great job. I
at
heard discourse. I heard professional learning network, or at least a professional learning community that helps students to talk to each other better. I heard giving the students opportunities to be more active and creative. So these are things that the administration, if you're listening out there, is needs to train the teachers on. This is it. This is
I
that.
would say at a very basic level, those are things that will probably be something that I would think about first and foremost.
Wonderful. Okay, last question. This is going to be a little bit more up your alley, because I remember in the interview you got really excited towards the end when you were talking about incorporating the fun into the trainings closer to
For
June.
teachers. Yep.
It's stressful for kids. It's stressful for teachers to learn all this stuff and to take the assessment. What stressors do you think cause students to underperform? Just looking at the programs and the way you taught teachers to teach in the pandemic, what stressors did you recognize um, during that time?
All of our students, all of our staff members are different. So they're not going to perform the same on the same assessment. What are some different ways that, of course, these are standardized assessments. So I am, somewhat, my hands are tied to some degree in terms of the way that, the student is actually accessing the assessment at the end. But leading up to that, what are multiple ways that I am able to assess a student's performance on an individual standard or multiple standards? So that's helpful because perhaps, and I know it's hard being in the classroom. You've got a lot of different, I think, our students and our teachers change as a result of the pandemic, right? So our needs are very different than they were before the pandemic even. So, I mean, we talk about personalized learning to so many degrees, but there are ways with a lot of planning and time, and I know that that's not as easy. It's easier said than done. But like if I'm able to assess our students differently in different ways, and I see David, for example, gets really nervous every time he has to, I don't know, speak in front of a class around a specific thing. And right now, my assessment is on doing a presentation in class, maybe not for first graders, but maybe so. What are other ways that I'm going to get David to still speak? Am I going to get him to show me what he knows by creating a song, a video, or some other way? And if you relax the student and give them the opportunity to show what they know in the way that works best for them, you remove that barrier and you can just determine exactly what the thing is that David is having a trouble about. And you remove the stressor of the actual assessment per se. And you can drill down and find out, well, David really doesn't understand phonemic awareness when it relates to this particular sound. And then that's what you can work on, right? So that when they see it in that standardized assessment, it's not as scary for them anymore because you've been able to extract the particular thing. And I think it's hard to do that. It's hard to have multiple ways of assessment in one classroom. But I think if you're giving the student an and even within choice, like it's like getting a child ready for school during the day. You don't just say go in there and pick out your clothes, especially a first grader. You might say, okay, it's cold today. Here are your three choices. Which one would
Right,
you like? You can do the
right.
same thing with assessment. Here are your three choices. If you're not really sure, this I can show you how to do this one. But here's some other ways. And then you might find that David will say, well, Miss Roberson, I also know how to I can make a song because my dad, he uses GarageBand or whatever. Okay, David, go ahead. You don't need my help. But at the end, the product of what I need to see is whether or not you can actually demonstrate your learning around that particular standard. So that helps reduce the stress of a standardized assessment. I mean, of course, you do the standard things that we always do. All right, when you're testing today, here's some things to expect, right? You do all that we always do. But I think you make your classroom fun by meeting the student where they are and giving them their need. I think that's the part that I miss. I mean, I do it now with adults, but that's the part that I miss as a classroom teacher.
Awesome. I'm going to skip this question and jump to professional learning. Now, this question was part of the geek out experience because I was like, oh man, they're on Twitter, they're using social media. This is where this came from. Absolutely.
We used
I
to. I don't know that we do it as much anymore, but we did during the pandemic quite a bit.
Are you familiar with iReady, Lexia, or Dreambox? Any of those
I'm
ring a bell?
familiar so here's again, this is me getting away from, my job now is to make sure that people have access to those things. I don't
Okay.
teach them, but I absolutely know that, math and Dreambox and Lexia and iReady are reading, right? I know those things because we make sure that people have the access that they need. So I'm not in it every day and I don't like train and know the content of it, but I'm somewhat aware.
Would you agree that it was helpful during the pandemic to have these kinds of game-based instructional tools under the teacher's belt? Would you agree with that?
I don't know. What do you think, David?
Oh, so glad you asked. I think it was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, how else are you going to get kids who are stuck in their rooms, stuck in their own world to come and actually sit down and do their math, they do their reading, do their science and social studies? How are you going to get them to do that? Let's give them some games to play. Let's give them some games to play that are going to get them reading, adding and subtracting, maybe doing some high-end multiplication so that we can collect some data and then find out how we can help them when they're back in the classroom.
I
I think
don't
it was
disagree.
absolutely the right move.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think the question that I have is, was it too much? Right? Did we give too many things at one time to a group of students? Because I'm also familiar with the fact that some require, excuse me, some require a specific amount of time on the particular application in order to actually show growth over time. So I think, I'm also of the mindset that you don't have to be on technology all the time, right? Like a student needs a break, and that we
Yes.
should balance, we should balance online and offline practices. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, because I think it met the needs of the student and helped them show growth over time. But I'm going back to something that I said earlier. I think I think that when we when this is the way that we show students that this is how they use technology, we cripple them from being able to show their creativity in other ways. So while I don't disagree, I think that the
It's time to
application,
move forward,
I'm not saying I mean lose it completely, but I also feel like I've seen people teach students there and forget it, like, and move on, right? And that's the part that there's so many things that are happening in education and instructional technology that if that's all we show our students, they're
hmm
going to miss a lot of growth in other areas that, some students who are going to STEM camps or things like, outside of schools are
speak on it.
are doing,
Hmm
So I think that's my only caution. And I think sometimes our demographic in Prince George's County, we have 85% students of color or more. And I want to make sure that our demographic is aligned with every other demographic as it relates to technology and the
hmm
ways that other people are accessing and utilizing technology. So I'm always nervous when I see, like, okay, you've used technology this much today and it's all been Dreambox, iReady, and Lexia. And now it's time to move on to something else, right? Like, how else can they use technology? I think that's my only caution. And this is me as an instructional technologist, right?
hmm
Um, so
Thank you very much. I can't agree more about the points you made about balance. I think it was good to have this plethora of games and to show not only the students but the parents that technology could be used this way. But I'm like, let's move it forward. There's augmented reality now. There's virtual reality now. There's models. There's little connection tools where everybody can be on the same project at the same time working on things. That's the exact kind of business mentality that other demographics are getting, so that when they graduate from high school, they're used to using technology and everybody being on the same platform and working at the same time on a project,
yep, yep. And when you think about the world of work, that's what we do.
isn't it?
So that's my 2 cents.
10,000 teachers trained. 10,000 teachers trained. Now, the more I dive into my degree, the more I'm thinking maybe I want to take a break from the classroom and move into instructional coaching. I'm thinking maybe I want to be one of these 10,000 teachers you trained in order to help other teachers get to, the class, the educational technology that I'm very fond of right now.
Hmm.
How would you say the government funding is looking for teachers like me who are like, hey, you know what, I'd like to be an instructional tech coach? Where do I start? Who can help me gain that kind of certification?
Um, for you specifically as an instructional coach, um, you know what? I don't know at the level of a coach what I mean. There are always grants, and there's always like what do you call it? Crowdsource funding that
Hmm
can be gained for an individual. I think at my level, right? Like, so at my level as a director of technology integration and support, I'm looking at large funding across the district. I'm looking at federal funding. I'm looking at state funding, right? So it's hard for me to really think right now about individual funding, but I'm thinking about how we take this funding that exists or doesn't exist in some cases and like make it available, make it available for people who need it at the core level in the way that you've mentioned. So I think one thing that the pandemic did, even though it was horrible, right? The pandemic was horrible in so many
Absolutely
ways.
horrible.
There were some growth spots for us through it, right? Like,
Evolution.
yeah, I mean, it was very clear and easy to see, especially in the state of Maryland. Unlike Virginia, where Virginia requires like an instructional coach in every particular school, we don't
Hmm.
have that here in Maryland. So across our LEAs, across our school districts, the level of technology integration looks really different. So I think it probably leads into the next question. Let's
It
see.
does. You hit
Community
it right. Hit
partners.
into it. You
Which
went right
local
into
district
it.
or state partners are most beneficial to the culture and climate of our school?
Because you said
Um,
right, there's that money. There's money out there. So if
yes,
I'm looking as a classroom teacher to up my game and get my kids to where I think they need to be, and I'm looking at this vehicle of educational technology, the money's there.
I
It
think
just seems like there's a barrier between me, the classroom teacher, and that money out there. And I want to say it's like the district that's funneling the money where they need it.
there isn't as much money as there used to be. I think the pandemic did give us some emergency school relief funding that expired as of September 30th of this year. So
Hmm.
it did give us lots of opportunities, which is why we were able in Prince George's County to fund, things like Dreambox and things that would help students
Hmm.
remotely access learning. Um, so I think it's harder right now post September 30th. Is October 15th today or
Hmm.
October? Yes, it's
Yeah.
October 15th today. So we're just 2 weeks, 2 weeks out from the expiration of funding, right? So now it's like us trying to go back and figure out like how do we fund these amazing programs or these amazing individuals that we were able to put in place to support students differently. So we do have to make some local district and state partners to make sure that we are continuing, the same course of learning that we saw and hopefully improved. Because of course we saw some drops in the way our students access learning during the pandemic. So how do we connect with our university partners and see what funding might be available? What organizations exist like MSET? Again, I'm speaking from a technology lens. So like
Mhm.
we have local technology organizations in the state that recognize teachers for what for their work in the classroom. So um, I think it's just about connecting to those different groups and those different organizations. Because right now in a school district, there isn't as much funding as there was during the pandemic.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Um, I do want to honor your time. We are in the last, I think, 5 minutes of the interview.
Okay.
Um, I I can't move away from this slide without sharing um, this story with you because I want you to understand how you actually impacted people, children in the classroom. I cut my teeth. I graduated from Bowie State. I went right into my summer job, which is working for Park and Planning. I love it. I've been working with Park and Planning for a long time, but I worked in an area of Riverdale, Maryland, where there is an incredibly high population of non-English speaking students,
Hmm.
students from the Middle East, refugees, heavy Latina and Latino Latinx population. And if it wasn't for the partnerships and the tools that you created with your team, those students who did not speak English, those students who came from countries that had no education, they would not have thrived the way they did at Riverdale Elementary School. I'm sitting down with kids, I'm teaching them to use Google Translate and Google products so that they can talk to each other in different languages
Yeah.
at my desk.
I will say those were the growths that we saw in spite of, like I said, as horrible as the pandemic was, like we saw a different level of engagement with
Mhm.
teachers, with students, like so. And I know when we first came back from the pandemic, it was like, okay, I'm done with this computer, put it away. Right.
Mm,
But like, what are some experience that you were able to gather with your students in a different way that you hadn't been able to do, I mean, there were some issues, of course, needless to say, but like
yes.
those are the things that you want to continue to highlight and to continue to build upon as we come back. We 4 years back from the pandemic at this point. So what kind of things do we continue and extend? I think that's where we are.
Well,
But
I
thank you. I
think the
like that
biggest
story.
one, I just wanted to give you your flowers because it's not often
It
that,
wasn't
we
me.
all
It
work.
wasn't
It,
me. It was
it
the
wasn't.
teachers. It was the teachers. They did an amazing job during the pandemic.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I just think you've said it so many times. We need more projects. We need to make sure that what we're doing, even at the elementary level, is preparing these kids for what they're going to be looking forward to at the high school level. There are kids starting businesses at the high school level. There are kids that are not waiting until they get their diploma in order to start making impact. And
Yeah.
communication is, I think, the biggest key. Communication is the biggest key. If we can teach these kids how to talk to each other, how to work with each other through technology, then the that's going to be the biggest tool under their belt when they start really focusing on what they want to do with their lives.
Right. And now we have artificial intelligence that is,
Skynet
it's
is
gonna
coming.
be
Skynet
I
is
mean, it's
coming.
here. It's here. And I'm like, we cannot afford to have our kids behind again. We just can't. Um, we had a whole conversation about access before. It's always been a digital divide because of access. So now all of our kids have Chromebooks, right? Or they should have access to a Chromebook. We're beyond access at this point. We don't see a large number of our students who don't have internet somewhere, right?
Mhm.
So then what is the next divide that we have to conquer? And I feel like if we are just pushing our students in tools, we're not giving them the space to grow um, in other areas that other demographics are. So,
Might I suggest that the next big divide is time, right? There's only 24 hours in a day, but let's
and
be completely
less
honest.
time in the classroom.
Right. Let's be like, how are we splitting up that time? 24 hours in a day, 7.5 hours of school time. Then they go off to do, you
90
know,
minutes for reading, then an hour for math. Then you understand what I'm saying? So what's the
yes,
answer? You know what I'm gonna tell you? How do you how do you create a project that allows students to immerse themselves into multiple skills? Because we don't even get to social studies, science, or health 9 times out of 10, you know? So we
I'm
got
not.
kids who can read,
I'll go on record as saying it's a struggle.
but then we got kids who don't know geography. Like, it's sad.
What is
So,
the
like,
Constitution of the United States? Hmm?
do they know? Do they know? You know? So, I mean,
You
yeah.
said something in the Common Sense interview, some glows and grows that I picked up from the interview that helped me to really think about this question. First, putting out podcasts. We need more teachers with content, and they need to get paid for it. This is just me standing on a really rickety soapbox for like 10 seconds. Pay me to put out content, Prince George's County Public Schools, so that when our kids, after they're done
You
with their
just you
day,
just heard about the funding that we don't have, didn't you? You
I
heard that.
did. I
But
heard,
okay, I hear
I heard,
you.
I
Shoot your
heard.
shot. I hear you.
I heard,
Okay.
but still, I mean, still, those partnerships make you can. I heard that the University of Maryland is partnering with Prince George's County Public Schools. I read an article. I don't want to quote the article because it's not on the top of my tongue, but the University of Maryland is partnering with Prince George's County Public Schools in order to up their intake of students from their surrounding community, College Park, Bowie, Upper Marlboro, things like that. Um, Help them out. There are plenty of college students there. You don't want to pay me, pay one of them. Pay one of these millennials who love to sit in front of, a glow ring and help them to help these kids.
We definitely have, teachers are at the front line, so we do need to hear from them more about what should happen in the classroom. I agree with that.
TikTok, video lessons, YouTube is my personal favorite because I'd stay the minute YouTube becomes YouTube University, I'm enrolling just
Okay.
to say that I got a degree from YouTube University.
Gotcha.
Last question. Last question. What are the benefits? And you've kind of touched on this from multiple viewpoints, and it was absolutely beautiful. But if you could just summarize, what are the benefits of revising our curriculum, our current curriculum, into project-based curriculum?
Isn't that something? You almost thought you were going to talk to me anyway, didn't you? So, again, I'm going to say I'm not from the space of curriculum, so I cannot
I understand.
specifically speak on what, curriculum offices should or should not do as it relates to their curriculum. But I mean, you've heard me talk about being a proponent of project-based
Yes.
learning. I think it does give us an option to look at time differently. And some curricular areas may have, I'm not as familiar as I used to be. So I think that's something to look at. I think it definitely would help as from a technology standpoint, right? It would definitely help from a technology standpoint because technology can be the tool that helps support that project, that helps
Mhm.
support a student solving a problem across multiple areas because you can bring in a variety of data using technology. You can display your data differently. You can
Mhm.
aggregate your data differently with the use of technology. So I think like access and internet is not an issue. I think time is an issue. I think teachers and students and parents being able to look to see, okay, well, how did my kid do on this particular standard if you wrapped all this together in a project? So it's just looking, I think it's looking differently. And realistically, we do have two of our international high schools who are focused on standards-based grading. So
Mhm.
they've looked at the way that they ax- access learning for their students differently. So I think it exists. I think it's something to like think about, but again, it's not up to me. I can't speak on it. I can just say it was fun when I did it in my classroom.
No, we appreciate the jewels you're dropping. Honestly, look, it warms my heart, number one, to know that somebody in your position is thinking like this, because that's what the kids need. It's honestly what the kids need, and it's the most organic transition into where we're going from right now.
And we've been talking about it for 20 years, honestly.
Okay, that is our time. I want to make sure that I am making sure that you are gone because I know that you've got a million wonderful things to do. You might be doing something amazing after this. And I just want to say thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with me and anybody who might be listening to this wonderful experience. Thank you so much. You deserve your flowers. I'm here to give it to you. If I had
You
an
do
applause
as
button,
well.
it'd be
Thank you,
going off
David.
right now. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
David. I appreciate you. Best wishes on your course at the University of Maryland Global Campus and to your project for Mr. Brian Cook. So thank you.
Thank you very much. These are my credits. I just want to make sure I gave the reference to the Common Sense interview that you held in 2020. And I also want to thank the Adobe Stock office for their wonderful images that helped make my presentation possible. Once again, thank you so much, Miss Kimberly Roberson. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. And thank you for your dedicated service.
Thank you, David.
Thank you to everybody who was here to join us with Ms. Kimberly Roberson and with David Foster. This is the end of the interview. I hope everybody has a blessed evening. Excelsior. Okay, that is the end of the
You
interview.
can stop your recording.
Bop, right there.